Welcome to David and Gilla's house. David and Gilla have gone to the theatre, but they'll watch the video. Thank you everybody for coming. A few announcements. First of all, this week's tzedakah is Mavoi Satum. Eliezer will talk a little bit about it. If not, Jack can also talk about it. I've organised another 4-part series of Krav Maga at El Halef. The first one is starting on this Tuesday, but there's also a Monday. So it's either Monday or Tuesday. If you're interested in joining, come and speak to me afterwards. Thank you, Effie, for videoing, and thank you all for coming, and hi.
Thank you to our teacher.
Sorry.
Thank you to our teacher.
Eliezer's now going to... Oh, yes. Oh, Eliezer.
Yes.
This is Eliezer.
Yes.
He's now going to tell you what he's talking about.
So, welcome everybody. Does anyone not know about Mavoi Satum? So it's an organization to help agunot, women who cannot get a divorce from their husbands. And I have a kind of connection to that because I was in agun for 5 years. I couldn't give the get. It's sort of unusual, but that's over. But I have this very soft spot in my heart for them. So I think it's a very worthwhile organization to contribute to.
What's it called?
Mavoi Satum.
And your sister-in-law?
And my sister-in-law.
What's there?
My sister-in-law works. Does she still work there?
Yeah.
Okay. My sister-in-law still works.
Do you want me to turn the lights?
For now it's fine. We'll see. I'm going to have handouts that will be in English. I'm having Hebrew up here because the Hebrew is actually much more elegant and beautiful. But it really doesn't matter. I thought of kind of giving a TED talk here. Does anybody know what TED stands for?
Oh, I used to. Something education.
So it's technology, entertainment, and design. So the technology part doesn't really work for this. So instead of a TED talk, I'm doing his brother a JED talk. So it's Jewish, and not entertainment but education. Okay, we'll be talking about the Torah today, and what I hope to be able to bring across to you is an amazing, what I consider mind-blowing new way to look at the entire Torah, which doesn't negate anything you've ever learned, but brings out like a factor of 1,000 more information in just understanding and concepts and just awe and respect for this incredible document.
I was going to actually introduce you and say, and now for something completely different.
Completely different, yes.
Because I think we won't have any other Shiur-n-Shmooze like this, right?
I'm sorry, what?
I have a feeling we've not had any other Shiur-n-Shmooze.
No, you've not had anything like this. No, and indeed, the design is actually also extremely critical here because you have to see this. You have to see the text organized on the page in order to appreciate what my teacher Moshe Kline has discovered, okay? Rediscovered. This information, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, we'll get to it, there's a few steps here. His principle, the concept is that the Torah was organized originally in columns and rows, that is blocks of text, no psukim taken out of order, but blocks of psukim organized in a matrix format, columns and rows. Okay. So the design is actually really quite critical. But before we get into this, I need to back up a little bit. I'm going to ask a few questions. We're going to start with some history. Who can tell me, according to nominative Judaism, how long ago was Yetziat Mitzrayim? This was good in history.
About 1,300 years ago almost. 2,300 years ago. 3,300 years ago almost.
347, I think it is.
Okay, so according to Google, for whatever that's worth, it's about 3,300 years plus or minus 100. Okay, I'm not going to get so specific on that. So I'd like to see, I'm going to ask you a very personal question here. I'd like to see a show of hands. Who believes that Yetziat Mitzrayim actually happened as a historical event. Excellent. Very nice. Okay, really good. My crowd yesterday didn't raise their hands. Interesting. Who here believes, raise your hand again, that 3,300 years ago, Moshe received the Torah at Har Sinai? Anybody? Okay, excellent. Of those of you who raised your hands just now, how many of you believe that the Torah we have today is the Torah Moshe received at Har Sinai? Fewer, right? So, of those of you who dropped your hands on the last question, I'd like to know why you don't believe that it's not the same. I'm sorry?
Maybe not completely verbatim.
Okay, so with maybe a few words here and there, or maybe whole chapters? There's no right or wrong answer. This is pure emunah. This is what people believe. I can't prove you're right, and I can't prove you're wrong. Right, now whatever.
But we can't prove that it was, because it was passed down.
Right, it's a matter of
generation. They didn't have.
And this is why I said
it wasn't written out until a certain point.
It's a personal question about what you believe. Okay, so anybody else want to say why they might not believe that what we have today is what he received 3,300 years ago?
Well, I believe that the text is fairly close to what was given, but I have a problem with the normative rabbinic view that, for example, those were the letters that were used, knowing that ancient Hebrew letters were different than these, whereas the view is that those were the original ones and they were forgotten, rediscovered. I think that's bunk. So in terms of, is it the same Torah? And therefore, I'm interested to see what you're going to say, because I don't know that the columns were as they were. So I'm referring to the text in general.
Right. So has anyone here ever heard of the document hypothesis of the Torah? Okay. So the document hypothesis, originally created by a man named Wannhausen about 150 years ago, contends that the Torah was derived from originally independent, parallel, and complete narratives, which were subsequently combined into the current form by a series of redactors. Okay, it's a little bit complicated. Basically what he's saying is, there are different pieces of text, and over the centuries, different people put them into this form that we now call the Torah. Okay. And they started out traditionally with 4 sources. I maybe you've heard of them: J, E, P, and D, which is J is for Yud He Vav He, E for Elohim, P for the priests, the Kohanim, and D for Dvarim, Deuteronomy. Okay, and they viewed it as at least 4 different sources. Now, anybody guess why? Why did they even come up with this idea?
Maybe stylistic.
I'm sorry?
The issues with stylistic.
Stylistic. Okay, very good. I think that's probably true. Any other guesses?
They find, for example, Deuteronomy being repetition with changes, and therefore they say this couldn't be the same source, because it seems to be internal contradictions.
Exactly. It's also true. There's a lot of repetition, right? So like one guy doesn't know what the other guy's doing. Why is this repeated here and repeated there? It doesn't make any sense. The answer has to be, it's just been an evolved text over time, and people threw in whatever they wanted. There's also the language that's used in certain places are very, very archaic. And it's different than the language. Now, it happens to be that those places all have to do with poetry. So those are the only exceptions, which are in themselves consistent. But that's what people approach, especially secular people, who I think have what I call an anti-myth perspective. What does that mean? What's a myth, first of all? A myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people, or explaining some natural or social phenomena, typically involving supernatural beings or events. Now, a myth can be historical. Anyone think of a historical myth? Something that actually happened, but it's a mythology. Think of it again. Traditional story concerning, something a little more modern.
Shambhudo saying Tov Lamut Ba'ad Artzeinu? Trumpeldor
Trumpeldor.
saying,
Yeah.
Tov lamut ba'ad artzenu. It's the legend, the myth, it's not necessarily true.
But I'm looking for something that is true. I'm
Can you
saying
read it? Can you read it
historical.
again?
Right. I'm going to simplify it. A traditional story concerning the early history of a people. Okay, I'm thinking of the American Revolution. The American Revolution is a mythology. It's about the creation of the American. It's totally true, right? There was clearly a secession from England. There were this war. But there's a mythology because this is the traditional story concerning the early history of the non-Native American people. Let's leave the Native Americans out of it for a second. But the country as it exists today. So it's really important. This is hard for us because we think of Greek mythology, we think Persian mythology, we think all these different mythologies. A myth can be true. It can be historically absolutely true. You can believe in Har Sinai. It's still our mythology. That it's the story of our people. Okay? And it's used in that context. So what I'm saying is that Weilhausen and his document hypothesis is a kind of anti-mythology. It's an attempt to explain away, as non-divine, these different aspects of this text that we have, all right? On the other side, so let's call it the left side, and on the right we have other mythologies, and there are countless numbers of situations in nominative orthodoxy and certainly in ultra-orthodoxy of things people believe that may or may not be true. And they become somehow fixed as, we sort of grew up thinking, well, this is always the way it was. For instance, dressing up for porn, right? We imagine this happened in Shushan, but of course it's only 500 years old. And it comes from the Catholics, and in Italy they were celebrating Carnival.
What about the very existence of Shushan as a real place? Isn't that?
Well, I'm talking about our traditions and our mythology and the things we believe, and how we tend to believe that everything always was the way it is today. So I want to address one particular issue, and that's, by way of a question, how many, from this Torah that we have today, how many parshiot are there?
56, I think, right?
Yeah. 53
I love this.
3 or 2. 55.
Okay, so they're actually, this is really provable, 54. 54 divisions. My next question is, how long have we had 54 divisions? Is this Torah Sinai? Okay.
After Sanhedrin even, no?
Byzantine, I'm guessing, somewhere like that.
It's when we went to a single year cycle from a triennial cycle.
Okay, when was that?
We went from single to triennial and then back to single.
Wait, so when was that?
I believe so.
We're talking, there's a span of 3,300 years. When did that happen?
I think it was Byzantine, but I'm not sure.
Oh, that's a very good guess. So it turns out that it's probably this 54 parshiot, divisions, it's probably between 1,000 and 1,500 years old. Okay, right? It's not actually so old. And in Israel, here in Eretz Israel, when they would read the Torah every, we didn't really say exactly when this was, but when they read, they had 155 divisions, and it was on a 3-year or 3.5-year cycle. So it was never always the same day.
What they do on Simchat Torah.
So that's my point.
They didn't have Simchat Torah.
There was no Simchat Torah 1,500 years ago. Okay, it didn't exist. It was only Shmini Atzeret, and my conjecture is that, I mean, this is a side point. Just a side point, but my conjecture is that they didn't know what to do with Shmini Atzeret. It's a very strange holiday. It's the 8th day of stopping, or the 8th day of convocation. How can you have a 9th day if it only says 8th day? So they said, let's divide the Torah in 54, and put it in a yearly cycle, and have the second day Shmini Atzeret be Simchat Torah. And in fact, in Israel, Simchat Torah was with bonfires, right? Because it wasn't a holiday. It was just a siyum.
It wasn't Hakafot Shniyot?
Yeah, Hakafot also came in. Hakafot came in the 1600s. Yeah, okay, Hakafot. Those only came in the 1600s. It's like 400 years. When we think of these things as ancient, right? And the reason I mention this is a way of introduction, because what I'm about to show you is a complete paradigm shift, and that sometimes can be quite challenging. for us to pivot and to see things in a different way and to accept them when they're so dramatically different. No, it's not that dramatically, but it actually is. So my teacher, Moshe Kline, rediscovered this concept of putting the text into columns and rows. First dividing it into units literarily, okay? What does that mean? It means that the words in the actual text tell you where to stop. Because, for example, you'll have words at the beginning, Hebrew words, and the same word is at the end of the unit. And it shows you that it bookends. It shows you this is completely new. And this happens over and over again, consistently throughout the entire Torah. If it happened once or twice, I would say coincidence, right? This is consistent. In fact, everything I'm about to tell you is consistent throughout the entire Torah when you have the ability to look at it from this way. So, the conjecture is that this understanding, this visual organization of the Torah is really a very, very powerful argument against the document hypothesis, primarily because all these things are consistent throughout the 5 books. It really speaks of one author, okay? And a lot of things are answered. All the questions the hypothesis documentary people, the document hypothesis people raise are pretty much answered by looking at the Torah the way it was intended to be read. Right? I'm going to show you this in a minute, but before I do that, I have to tell you about a few of the constructs that are used throughout the Torah. So that you have units. Units are divided by the words, by the story sometimes. Often you can tell by the story. Sometimes you need to look at the actual language that's used and you can see the parallels. Another construct is what's called a 2-column unit. There are two of these. There's either a 2-column or a 3-column unit. The number of rows can go from 2 to 6, but the number of columns is critical. So there are 2 paradigms here. When you have a 2-column unit, it's always about duality. Right? I'm going to give you a very trivial example, and then we're going to hand out an example that's much more complicated. There's a part in Reshit where there is this sort of story that, as you read it, maybe you don't even notice it, but it mentions a birth and a death, and a birth and a death, and a birth and a death. And it's a very nice birth and death. But when you take it and you put it into 2 columns, what you get is you get birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. You have birth and you have death. You have duality. You have one playing off the other. Okay, and it becomes amazingly beautiful. There's a message behind it. This is a very simple example, but I'm going to something more complicated. I wanted to give you sort of a taste of how you have dualities. The 3-column units are slightly different. They're a little more complicated. Here, and Moshe Kline numbers the rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he letters the columns Aleph, Bet, Gimel. So pretty much every time, column Aleph is the thesis, column Gimel is the antithesis, and column Bet, which is physically in the middle, is the synthesis. It brings one side and the other together. It's emerging. Now, in the West, we tend to think thesis, antithesis, synthesis. We think in that order. But in the biblical context, it's first of all, they didn't have numbers, right? All the chapter numbers and psukim, you know where those come from?
Christians, the church.
1205, the Archbishop of Canterbury, that's right. So imagine learning Torah without chapter numbers. And that's also, I wanted to say, another reason that Moshe Kline uses the word unit and not chapter. I don't want to confuse it with the chapters we have, and of course we have Parsha, which is the wrong division, I'm going to argue. So they're called units. So you have units, and you have columns. And then there are 2 more constructs that are used. One of them, and this is also an important one, we'll also see this in what we're going to study, is the concept of a fractal. Does anybody know what a fractal is? Mm-hmm. Okay, fractal is basically, if I simplify it, the parts which construct the whole are the same form as the whole. Right? So you have a hexagon, think of a honeycomb, and it's made of smaller honeycombs, and that smaller honeycomb is made of smaller honeycombs, and as you zoom in, it has the same form. Okay? And we're going to see this, that's true not only within a unit, and our first unit has a fractal, but across units as well. There are fractals, and also these three-column symmetry also works across units as well. And what this means, because it's so universal throughout the entire book, when you look at it this way, that it's undeniably a single author who put this together in this way. You can't do this by accident. You can't do this by committee. It's just too amazing. So we'll get to it in a second. I'll show you some more examples. Okay, so let's actually go. I only have 15 of these copies, so you're probably going to have to share. A second. And they're in English. I have the Hebrew. I'm going to put the Hebrew up on the board because the Hebrew is really much more beautiful. Okay, so if you guys could share.
I have a question about fractals.
Yes.
Isn't the whole of creation also?
You can, yes. I mean, so
human beings and DNA.
So yes. So let me actually mention. It's like I wanted to thank you. If you, for those of you who know a little bit about particles and how mass, the fact is that we consist mostly of space, right? Compared to the size, the relative size of an electron and a proton, it's mostly space in between them. And it's actually the electromagnetic forces that keep us from running through ourselves, right? But the fact is we're mostly space. Compared to, the distances are vast compared to the size of the electron and proton. That's the microcosm. The macrocosm, zoom out into the universe, and again, the distance between stars is huge compared to the size of the star. So that's a fractal, where the microcosm constructs.
The shape of, like, the DNA.
Yes, as well. But there's a reflection of, in this case,
in creation, the created world that is connected, obviously, to the Torah. I mean, the world is created from looking into the Torah, then it makes sense that creation would also be made up of fractals, and that means that God wrote it.
Okay, so we're going to go and we're going to do Unit 1. Now, Unit 1 is the paradigm for the entire 5 books. Okay, and one second. Here. So the first thing you'll notice is that this is a 2-column unit, and we're going to start at the beginning here. So I'm going to just put at the beginning, and that it has 5 rows. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, it has 3 rows. It has rows 1, 2, and 3, and row 2 is divided into 3 rows. So there you have right away a fractal. You have the middle unit, which is a reflection of the whole unit, right? The whole unit has 3 divisions. The middle unit has 3 divisions, right? It's an amazingly elegant and symmetric construct. Also, it can be said, this is a little more complicated in advance, but each row, each of the 5 rows, is representative of each of the 5 books, which is also really interesting. It's another teaching we're going to a little bit later. But let's dive into some text. I don't want to read it exactly. I'm not going to read all this because you know most of the story. We will start with row 1 because row 1 shows the paradigm of this unit. All right. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. Right. We all know this. Row 2, right? The earth was unformed and void. Just write this over. Okay?
Column
Tohu v'vohu.
Right?
Is it column 2? Yeah.
Column 2, sorry, column 2. That's it, column 2, sorry. And the Ruach Elohim hovered over the face of the waters. Now, the first thing you notice when you've done this for a while, looks like I'm going to get this, but after a lot of training and a lot of diving and a lot of being able to see this thing, is that as you look at the order of the words in these 2 psukim, in column 1, you have Elohim, Shemayim, Aretz. What do you have? I'm sorry, 1 Aleph. In 1 Bet, what do you have? Aretz. Tohu Vohu, which is like Shemayim. It's sort of a void, unformed. And Ruach Elohim. You have exactly the reverse order. So there you already get a hint of the reflection that these two columns have different messages.
And one is choshech and one is or. No, that's the next one. Sorry.
Yeah, wait. So we'll just stick with row. So you can think of kind of what we're going to see as we go down the columns is there's
What's the parallel
opposites.
to heaven?
Tohu Bohu.
Why is that parallel?
Because
It's an unknown.
let me it's I'm going to take liberty here with my translation of Shemayim Va'aretz. I translate Shemayim as the metaphysical and Aretz as the physical. Okay? So the metaphysical you can't touch.
Well, that's Hashem. That's already
There's a lot more to it than that. There's I'm going to argue a fifth dimension beyond the four dimensions we existed, which is Shemayim, which is the metaphysical, which is the place of the soul, the domain of the soul, the domain of God, whatever. And that's, you can't touch it. Tohu, you can't touch it. It's not earth, it's not solid, it's not material, right? So it's sort of symbolic of that. Take it for a moment. Hold that for a second. Now I'm going to go through the days, and we're not going to read this, just because we all know the story, right? We have in 2 Aleph, day 1, 2, and 3, right? And in 2 Bet, days 4, 5, and 6. Now one of the major objections is always, why is it that the stars are named after the grass and the trees, you know? It doesn't make any sense. But when you organize it like this, actually it makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to do the science here. The science, I'll recommend you read Gerald Schroeder's The Science of God. He goes through each day. He shows how it matches physics perfectly with no problem. Okay? We're doing here the more poetic, the more spiritual interpretation to understand what's going on. Because there's a deeper message than physics and science. So, if you look at what's created in each day, what do you see? You see in Aleph, in 2 Aleph, you see light and darkness. You see the Rikia, the firmament, which separates. And in 2C, you have earth and the seas, and the fruits and the trees. Okay, fruit, trees, and grass. Right? In 2 Bet, you have the lights. You have fish and birds on day 5. And you have beasts and man on day 6. So there's some really interesting parallels you can draw. And normally I would ask if you could see them, but they're not obvious unless you're really trained in this, because it's hard to see. But I'm just going to cut to the chase. I'm going to tell you.
Well, you're underestimating us.
I am, but it's really difficult.
Go on, give us a
Okay, all right, fine.
Okay, what are we looking for?
You're looking for commonalities of days 1, 2, and 3, and opposites of commonalities in days 4, 5, and 6.
Can you go back to, can you see
You see the Hebrew on one side.
Yeah.
What do you mean by opposites of commonalities?
Well,
Like
That's
if there's
it.
light, then like darkness would be the opposite of light.
that would be an
It's almost
example,
like
although that's not really what's happening in this case.
So in
That's-
A, you're separating the waters, and in B, you're separating night and day.
You're separating what?
Night
Yeah.
and day.
It would be
Vaikra, no, he's saying Vaikra a few times on the slides.
Let's start with the beginning. Look at column Aleph. What do you see that's common to A, B, and C?
Divine thing.
Okay, that's true. Dividing. Okay, what else?
Fruit-bearing trees are not divided.
That's true. That's also true.
Let me see.
It's not
He's
one of
calling
the
forth.
things
Does
I
that mean
think.
it had already potential to exist previously?
I'm sorry?
He says Vaikra. You highlighted Vaikra a few times.
Yes. Which
Does it
color?
actually have yellow?
Yeah, that's kind of orange. Orange
The
is.
left column is she's saying, column 1.
Yeah, he called light day.
Yes, because
darkness,
there's
night.
because that
All
word
from- yes,
that
but I'm
word
asking-
runs through this column.
Yes, and your other side it says blessed.
Yes, that's right. So that's the distinction.
There is a distinction. The question is the distinction because of the potential that already existed when he called forth, and the potential that existed after that he asked it to happen and then
Okay.
blessed it.
Okay.
Is there a difference
Possibly.
in that?
I want to focus on the things that were created on these days.
So the first 3 are all non-living things,
Very good. Okay.
and the other ones are the living creatures.
Well, kind of. The stars are not really living.
Grass and fruit trees.
Yes, and those live.
Why do people keep forgetting the grass and the
Yes,
fruit trees?
grass and fruit
Because
trees.
that's the grass and fruit trees.
So I'm
Things
gonna-
that you could touch, as opposed to
Okay.
tangible.
Rikia you can't touch.
You can use and things that you
It's
can't.
not created.
Like, I mean, that you can, right, you can.
Look, just
So
at these
it's
one, two,
images
three.
like that.
Oh, days what?
No.
1, 2, and 3. There's something, there are three
I understand
things
what you're saying.
that everything that's created on those 3 days have in common.
Sorry, what?
So I'll give, there are three
Can you
things
tell
that
us
are
one?
common. So I'll give you one of them. Okay? In the days 1, 2, and 3, everything that's created is named, and in 4, 5, and 6, it's not named. Okay? Lights is not named. It doesn't say sun and moon. It says luminaries. It's not named. Light and darkness is named. Rikia is named. Earth and seas are named. Man and beast, there's no name there. That's a klali name. It's a general name for the species and for the life forms.
But it's free.
It's true. Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll follow up with that in a second. In addition, not only they're named, everything that's created in days 1, 2, and 3 is static. Everything created in days 4, 5, and 6 is dynamic. They move. The stars move, the birds move, the fish move. Water is sort of, it's kind of static. It's a
Unless there's
mass,
a tide.
right? Think of it as,
Well, it didn't happen.
relatively speaking, the seas, the oceans, they don't really go all over the place. Water has their waves, but the water, you know how a wave
When
works.
rivers move and
No, that's true.
streams
But we're
move
talking
and
about oceans. We're talking about massive
oceans
bodies.
are not still at all.
Okay, there's a flow to them, but they don't move around in the sense that once they're here, now they're on top of Mount Everest,
Okay.
right? They're where they are. Okay, birds they move around, right?
Unless they're dead. Yes.
Unless they're okay. Thank you. Hadn't thought of that.
Live situation.
Sorry, I've multiplied them.
One day it was good, and the other day there's one day mentioned that it was good, and the other 2 days the days were second day and third day.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute because we're looking at the columns now, right? So you have, on one hand, static. On the other hand, dynamic. You have named. You have unnamed. You have singular. You have plural. Right? This is opposites. This is duality. This is pure duality in its simplest form. Now we can do the rows. Okay? We can do 2A, 2B, and 2C. Okay? And here is where it really comes together. Because this, by the way, there's something, he calls the Torah a fabric. A second. There's some, did anybody here, I don't know if sewing is good enough, work on a loom,
Weave.
right?
It's called
Or weaving, thank you.
weave.
It's a weave, and there's the weft and the warp, right? So the weft is what we read. It's the linear Torah. And it's the warp that's hidden, that's more subtle. And now we're going to do the warp. And actually, if you think about it, this unit, which is the paradigm for all 5 books, has both the duality of 2-column and the 3-column aspect to it. But the 3 columns rotated in this particular case because you can't do 2 and 3 columns, but they do it by rotating it. So we're going to see that now, right? If you look at A, 2A, what do you see? What's created on those 2 days, days 1 and 4? Light and luminaries.
Night.
They're all above. They're all above. Look at C, right? Look at C. Earth and seas, man and beast. It's all below. Now look at days 2 and 5. You have the rikia that separates above and below, and you have the fish that connect above and below. Okay? The fish and birds that connect above and below. Right? So there's a symmetry, and there's an oppositeness to it, right? The rikia which separates, the birds and fish which actually connect. Right? And
How does the fish connect?
fish go up and they go down. They come up, they surface. Some mammals will come up and breathe, and they'll go down. From the depths to our level.
Some fish come above water, like
Yes.
salmon, and some birds go down, kingfishers.
Well, birds fly and they come down to earth.
Birds, I understand.
Dolphins
have to come up and breathe.
But it's a poetry. It's sort of a poetry of a
Right.
symbolism.
They come up
The
and
fact
breathe.
that you're connecting what you have above you have your thesis above, you have antithesis below, and you have synthesis in the middle. Okay? And this is what you see time and time and time again in every single thing throughout the entire Torah is completely constructed in this way. Okay? If you know how to look for it. And I'll add that this knowledge was known by the people who wrote the Mishnah, because they wrote the Mishnah in exactly the same way. You can do the same thing. The Mishnah, Moshe Kline did it. Actually, he started with Mishnah. He found that this matrix worked there, and he said, wait a second, if it works for the Mishnah, let's look at the Torah. And he read it, and he says, it works for the Torah. Because they knew this. And this is, I think, actually one of the more tragic things of Judaism, because this was clearly esoteric knowledge. This was knowledge that was understood or meant for only the select few. It was hidden knowledge for people in the know, and they died, and they didn't pass it on, and now it's been lost and rediscovered.
What is the esoteric message of above, below, and in the middle? Like, for example, I mean, you can think about that for a long time, but what is above is below? Is there some kind of particular?
The idea is about life is all about these things. It's about one extreme, another extreme, and finding the middle way, about merging them in together. And then the Torah, according to Moshe Kline, is a fabric, a blueprint for society of how to weave together people to live in a constructive, healthy way. And that every time you see a set of laws in the Torah, he argues that they are paradigms for something bigger. There's a bigger message that you look at to see and glean out from that. The laws, I'm not going to say individual laws are not important, but the paradigm they represent are more important. And we sometimes get stuck on the individual laws, and the way to understand them and to interpret them in a healthy way is to look at how the laws relate to each other across the columns and understand their juxtaposition. Why are they where they are, and why is one against the other? Right? And you can learn things from that you cannot learn if you just read it linearly.
What's the idea of C1 and C2?
C1 and C2, that's a really good question. I'm going to give you my answer to this. One of the reasons I love this is because we have a shiur every Wednesday night at Yedidja at 6:45 to 8, and I walk out of this higher than a kite every single time. And I realized only 2 days ago the reason why. We're actually on the cutting edge of this revolutionary way with the Torah. We unpack every unit, and it's new. There are no Meforshim, there's no Midrash, there's nobody that's done this before. And we have to interpret and understand, what does it mean? What's the symbolism? What's being said here? What's the message? And it's amazingly exciting. I mean, I can't tell you what it's like that when the light bulb goes on and you see the relevance and what's trying to be said. Okay? So, I'll give you my interpretation of this, and it's not right. Okay? There's no right here. It's an understanding. There's in Bereshit, there are 3 basic names for the Creator. Right? This is a slight tangent, but I think it's important. There's Yud Hey Vav Hey, which I pronounce Havaya, Hey Vav Yud Hey, and rearrange letters. I'll learn that in a second. Then there's Elohim, and there's El Shaddai. Okay, those are basically the 3 names. Adonai is not a name. Right? I don't know if anyone wants to disagree with me on that. It is a title, right? It means my masters or my lords. It's a title, it's not a name. So I'm not counting that as a name. And
Isn't Elohim also a title, not a name?
No, Elohim is actually a name.
Because we always talk about Elohim up Yerim, that means it's a descriptor.
It can use this, what it actually means, and I'm going to get to this, it's a really good question. When you look at the context, and this is what this teaching does, if you look at the context of words, where they're used. The blue words, by the way, here, I'm just a quick aside, show you connections between columns, right? It's the same word used, and that's how you know where to put the block of text, because the words connect the columns, okay? So when you look at how and when the name Elohim is used, what you see, what falls out of that from the text, and it's not is that Elohim is the God of physicality and the God of nations. It's always used in nations. And I talked that with Avram Leader, and he said actually, the word Elohim means forces of nature. That's what it sort of means. It's plural, and it's about power. Okay, forces of nature. Now there's, and Havaya is the opposite. Havaya is the God of spirituality and the individual. And this is why, and Elle and I had this little thing about Noach. I think Noach is really takes a bum rap on his situation, because it turns out, if you read the Torah carefully, never, ever, ever in the entire Torah does anyone, including Avraham, ever object to a command by Elohim. And the reason is they can't. Because you can't argue with gravity.
The gematria of everything is also Hateva.
Is what?
Hateva.
See, there you go. You can't argue with gravity. You may not believe in gravity, but when you drop your glass, it's going to break. Okay, whether you believe in it or not. There's simply no argument. You just have to do what the God of nature says to do. Havaya is the God of the individual.
You're talking about just the 5 books?
Yes, talking about the 5 books.
Okay.
Okay.
I was going to throw in Yonah, but okay.
Well, I'm more focused on Bereshit in this, because after Bereshit, the next 3 books pretty much is all Havaya. There's some Elohim in there. It changes slightly because it becomes our story, whereas Bereshit is about the world. It's leading up to Yetziat Mitzrayim, but it's basically a more global story. So it's Elohim that comes to Noach and says, I'm going to destroy the world. He cannot say anything. He can't. It's just, you don't argue with gravity. Just don't do it. It's Elohim that comes to Avram and says, sacrifice your son. Avram doesn't say a word because he can't.
What about Moshe? Are you talking about Moshe too? Because Moshe didn't want to go and he didn't want to be the leader.
So Moshe, there's this sort of transition where he starts out as Elohim and it becomes Havaya.
Which one is it that wants to destroy Sodom that Avram?
So it's Havaya. It's Havaya that comes and wants us to destroy Sodom. And Avram says, just a second.
Nadia, with Moshe, it's also El Shaddai.
Yes, there's also El Shaddai. Interestingly enough, anytime anyone's name is changed, and this is really interesting, and I don't have an understanding for this yet, because I would have thought it would be the opposite. It's always Elohim that changes the name of someone. Really interesting. It's physical. There's something about the physicality of who you are, your genetics, that brings out your name. Okay? It's the DNA, it's your DNA that decides who you are somehow. It's fascinating.
I don't know if you've answered Joel's question yet about the C1 and C2, but...
No, I have not answered the question. I was getting there. So in this creation story, it's all about Elohim. Who is Elohim? Elohim is the God of physicality, right? So when it comes to creating the earth and living things, they get those days get 2 creations. They get a double portion, because this is his domain. This is where he's powerful. It's really good for him. You know, the spiritual stuff, that's nice, but it's really, it's just my argument. I don't have really, find an understanding. And that's the beauty of this, is that you can go and you can dig into this and you can create your own Torah, the ideas of why is it like this. These are very...
What about when I read the first creation story and then the second creation story, that was totally different. I thought, hold on, they're 2 different people or whatever writing this, and there are so many different. This is what a lot of people say, that the Torah is written by different people.
Correct.
Because it's not just that; it's the forms. So just if you bring in those 2 stories, how can you explain it and why they're 2 stories?
I'm gonna bring in these 2 stories. First, I'm gonna prelude to this, right? I want to ask, how many creation stories are there in Bereshit? 2, right? Everybody says 2.
At least 2.
Turn over your page. There are 3. There are 3 creation stories. How do you know this? How do you know there are 3?
So what's the meaning of 3 colors?
There are 3 colors. Very good, Rachel.
How do you know there are 3? No, after they got thrown out of Gan Eden. Oh, you wrote it all down. What do I have to think of it?
How do you know there are 3?
Sorry, what's the third name? The meaning of the third name?
El Shaddai. I don't know. No, we've lost this information. I don't know.
What?
I don't know the meaning of
We
Elshad.
don't use it often even in prayer.
Power of the breast. I don't know. It's
Not much.
I don't know. Sorry.
Moshe sees
It's a good question. We tried to unpack this. I think we've just lost the information. So I'm going to read to you in Hebrew the first words. You don't have it of units 1, 2, and 3, right? 1, you know, Yeshit Bara. Unit 2 begins. Eila toldot hashamayim v'haaretz bebaram b'yom asot havaya Elohim haaretz v'shamayim. Bebara, there's the word, bara, created, okay? In the day. And unit 3 starts. Zeh sefer toldot Adam b'yom bara Elohim Adam. Okay? There's the third one.
When was that bit?
That's unit 3.
Where does it, what does it go?
What does it come after?
And that's exactly what I'm going to address right now. So it turns out that unit 3, when you look at the content of unit 3, it's all about the history of early man. Okay? It's almost no Elohim in there at all. Or Havayat Elohim. It's about man. So you have unit 3 is about man. You have unit 1 is all Elohim. And surprise, surprise, unit 2 is Havayat Elohim, and the Dam. It's emerging. It's a thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Okay? And when you unpack unit 2 in this way, everything becomes. We can't do that now. It's a long study, so it's beautiful learning, but it's involved. Okay? This is not really for 1 foot. This is really stuff you have to dive into. I need you to sort of trust me on this. I'm happy to sit with you and learn with it another time. I'm glad to do that. But it's when you see the construct, when you see it in this way, everything makes sense. Everything becomes clear. Things fall out. There's this whole thing actually with the sons of Elohim and the daughters of Havayah. You know this? There's all this stuff in my sheet that makes no sense at all. And there's also, if you look at the words very carefully, there's Adam and there's Ha-Adam. And they're 2 different people, actually, according to Moshe Kline. And there's a dance going on between them in their stories when you read it in this way. I mean, there's just mind-blowing things come out of this. The stories are not as different as they look when you organize them in this way. The things make sense. Things fall into place. The puzzle pieces fit in a very coherent and natural way, in an unforced way. Because you look at the language tells you, wow, this belongs with this, and it looks like this, and I can't give you more details right now. Moshe Kline can give you more details. I don't have it in my head. He's uploaded the whole thing, and he can do this on paper. It's not really, I'm focused on the first unit. But the amazing thing is you see in these 3 units, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In the units, the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Right? It's all there, and it's beautiful, and it's spectacular, and it's amazing. And we'll go on, and we'll just do a couple more things. I need to leave this because I want to get a couple more things in, and maybe we can throw some other questions. Okay, so let's go to the map here. Okay, this is a map of the entire Torah. You have it on your sheet. It's the same map. I don't have a sheet, so I'm going to use this. Okay. So we discussed Breshit a little bit. I'm not really prepared to talk about Shemot so much, about Exodus, but I can tell you that the first 4 units of Shemot all take place in Mitzrayim. Unit 5, which is a separator between Mitzrayim and outside Mitzrayim, is the story of Yam Suf. Okay? And that there are 3 more sections with 2 more separators that separate sort of the metaphysical world they wind up going into with the man, and then all kinds of sort of miraculous things happening with the stick that goes into the water to make it not bitter anymore. There are different progressions in Shemot, but I'd like to address for a minute Vayikra, Leviticus, because Leviticus is the poster child for the document hypothesis. Leviticus has it all. It has different language, different style, it has repetition, nobody knows what's going on. I mean, how many people here like Vayikra? Really? If you had a book to sit down, you'd sit down and you'd read Vayikra, right? It is dry, it is boring, it is just a bunch of laws and sacrifices. What? I'm sorry? It's all about
It's about
sacrifices.
body parts of animals.
Yes.
Let's not forget Sarah.
So we're going to get to all this in a second, and it's absolutely, which should be pointed out, is that this is the middle book, so it's the center of the Torah, and it is absolutely an amazing book, and when you learn it from Moshe Kline, suddenly it becomes miraculous, it becomes stunning, it becomes something that you never thought it could be, right? So what is it? So when you actually dive into the content of the individual chapters, what you see is that the first 3 chapters have the same theme as the last 3 chapters. Right? This is a classic example. Well, why would you put them all together? Right? Why aren't the first 6 units blue? Similarly with the green, similarly with I guess it's peach, right? Until you get to the center. So what Vayikra represents, metaphorically, it's actually the path, the journey, the Kohen HaGadol traverses as he goes from the Chatzer to the Kodeshim, to the Kodesh Kodeshim, to the Aron Kodesh in the center, turns around and walks out. Kodesh Kodeshim, Kodeshim, Chatzer. Okay?
How did you get that?
By studying the content of. So what? That's another 2 hours. It's another 2 show, but I will give you an example. I'll give you an example. How do you know this? So if you look at all the units here, every law is addressed to the individual. Okay? And why? Because the Kohen Gadol, he's going in. He's going in to himself, he's going into the Kodesh Kodeshim. He's going in, right? And he may not come out, right? But he's going in. So it's very, very personal and very individual. All of the laws here are communal, right? Because he's turned around now, he's facing the crowd, and he's coming out into the people. And I'll give you a specific example. In Unit 12, there's this prohibition about you will not give your seed to Moloch. You know this? Anybody know this? Moloch is this god, this Avodah Zarah, right? In Unit 14 is the same law, but it's not the same law. It's not the same law. Because here it says you shall not do this, and here it says what the klal, what the community will do to someone who does that. Okay? The perspective has changed. It's gone from the individual to the community.
Give us another example.
That's a pretty good example.
I see the symmetry in all this. Can you explain Leviticus C and Deuteronomy E?
We haven't studied Dvarim yet, so I
Okay,
can't.
well, what about Leviticus C, which seems to break the symmetry?
Yes. So, brilliant question. I was about to get to that. No, I can't give you another example off the top of my head. There are probably hundreds, or tens, if not tens, of examples. Come to our class, not yet, and I'll give you all the examples you want.
No,
Okay?
no, Joel's got a good
Okay.
question.
So yes. So what about C? What about the C? This is a kind of funny thing, right? You have this group, this triad, stuck in there between the Kodeshim and the Kodesh Kodeshim. Well, what's between the Kodeshim and the Kodesh Kodeshim? What?
The Parochet.
The Parochet. The Parochet.
It's also on the way out.
It's also on the way out, but it's more important on the way in because it's open on the way in. Okay, let's just bear with me for a second.
Okay.
It's discussed in 7, 8, and 9. Anybody know? Probably don't know.
We're
I'm
going
gonna
to
tell
tell
you.
9 hours. So.
Right, so I'll tell you. It's Sahat. Okay? All grouped together. What's the connection? What's the connection?
Oh, what you do on the inside shows on the outside.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what
Okay.
you're talking about?
That's also, yeah, okay.
Meaning if you do Lashon
But
Hara,
also,
it's showing your
only the
skin.
Kohen Gadol, if you check the Torah, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it the only you could declare?
Yes, that's
When
true.
people have Sarat, they're
This
sent
is
out
all
of the
Kohen.
community.
And when
people are hiding their wealth, the
But
house
what's the
gets
connection to the skin and the parachute?
There's a veil, there's a,
What is skin?
It's a layer.
it's always a covering.
It divides us from our insides into the outside world. It's the divider between the inside and the outside. And this is kind of, he calls it a smoke screen. He sort of said it's this thing to throw you off the trail a little bit, but it's also there symbolically to show you that this skin disease, that this thing that's on the surface, right? This is that our skin is the divider between the Kodeshim and the Kodesh Kodeshim. That there's this pearl, right? It's the pearl. That's his symbolic understanding. Is that the only understanding? No, absolutely not. It's something that we've learned from this, and you can learn so much more. This is what I'm trying to say, is that we're in the cutting edge here. There's so much to learn. There's so much that's not been explored. There's a whole world out there to understand. What does this represent? What's the symbolism? Why? And you'll notice that these laws are here and they're not there. And they're not there. They're here. And they're there for a very specific reason. And that's his big message. This is all done with intention. This is done on purpose. This is done to show us symbolically what these things represent.
So G is also divided, no?
G. No.
G is parallel to B.
G is parallel to B because the subjects of it, there's no, the parachut is only in the way in for some reason. Ask Moshe Kline. That's
But by the same token, you've got a white area in Bereshit that is also out of place. What is covered in Unit 4, in your definition of Unit 4?
Unit 4 is Babel, actually. It's the story of Babel. It sort of divides. It's a sort of divider as well. I want to do one more thing. Let's do.
Wait, I have a question.
Yeah. Okay.
So does that mean that, so you're saying that Vayikra is in the middle, so Vayikra is like the skin or
So-
the whole book?
No. So Vayikra is all about the Kohanim, and it's all about spirituality. It's actually, if you uncover these laws, the sacrifices, all these things, it's very, very mystical. Okay. And the really funny thing, the really interesting thing, brings it home. The Aron HaKodesh, is the center of the center book of the center of the Torah. This is the heart. This is it. And you know what laws are discussed there? It's really interesting. You'll never guess this, I don't think you'll guess
But I have to probably around there.
I can guess it.
Yeah.
She knows.
She probably does. They're all laws about human sexuality.
I was going to say that too.
Okay? So think about that, right? This book is ostensibly all about spirituality. At its center, at its core, is human sexuality.
Is that Kedoshim?
That's the
Kodesh
Kodesh. That's the
Aron
Aron
HaKodesh.
I said Kodesh Parsha Kedoshim.
I don't know Parsha. I don't deal with Parsha. We don't deal with Parsha. Parsha are not relevant. Okay? It's Unit 13.
That reflects the structure of the actual, the Aron that had the Kruvim are Eros.
Yes.
They are the heart.
Yes. And that's why those laws are discussed at the Aron
Tell me
HaKodesh.
something. When the Kohen Gadol went in, he went in forwards, and then when he came out backwards.
At some point he has to turn around.
We don't know.
Maybe after the Holy
But what I'm thinking is with the why is there the parachut? Because it's like you see it, it's straight
Oh, you
ahead.
see it when you come in,
But
and
when
you
he
don't see
came
it when you
back,
go.
that's what I was
Very good,
thinking.
very good. So you don't see it when you're walking
You
out.
turn his back to his
Right,
after.
right,
Yeah, you wouldn't
exactly.
turn it, you might turn
Which is
it.
why he doesn't see it when he comes out. Okay, no, but see, that's the joy in this for me. And it's like you give this meaning to things. This was the most boring book in the world when you don't read it like this. When you read it like this, it's amazing, it's mind-blowing, it's exciting. There are these paradigms and parallels and understandings that come out that you can't possibly see. And we haven't even done the units. And you go into the units and they're exactly the same thing. You're looking at the big picture now. As you zoom in, you get exactly the same thing. You get these columns and rows and ideas and relationships between the different laws that give them so much meaning.
So the sacrifices themselves also break down into structures?
Yes, they all break down. I can't answer that. Moshe can do that. I'm not
No, I'm
anywhere
just
near
asking a
prepared.
general question.
Yeah.
Did he give you a different perspective on what sacrifices are to study it that way? Because, as we said, the Ikra has a lot of sacrifices in it.
Yes.
We, as Muslims who don't sacrifice, don't always know what to do with that. So I was just wondering if this type of learning
I'm going to say yes. I can't remember exactly what we said. I'd have to think about it. I don't want to say something flippant. It's a very good question that deserves a respectful answer. But the answer is yes. That's my memory of us going through and doing this and coming up with these understandings and what they mean. And they really are beautiful. There's a beauty to this that is it's just unimaginable that even one person. It's really, really, really awe-inspiring.
If it's a person.
Right. Well, this is for those of us of faith, we believe this is divine. And this, for me, learning this way has just completely confirmed that. That this is just, because the structure it's consistent throughout the entire book. I want to do one more thing in Bamidbar, okay, really quickly, if I can. What is the story of Bamidbar? Basically, if I had to sum up the book,
40 years in the desert.
yeah, it's the travails, the travels of Am Yisrael, right?
Yeah.
Basically, it's the journeys of the people, right? So we have here. Here's the birth of the people. Here is the soul of the people. It's really about spirituality, and here is about tachlis. Here's about avanti papalo. Right? Let's do it. Let's go. Let's. And so, what do you see here? What does the structure look like in the book to you? Does it remind you of anything?
Like the way they camped.
Exactly. Exactly. This is the way they camped, right? And it's structured as a reflection of what it is, right? This is how they travel. But it gets even, the Mishkan's in the middle, right? And what's even more amazing.
And is that what section 7 is, the Mishkan?
I don't remember. Not necessarily. No, not necessarily, no. But obviously, these units are colored because they have similar themes. Just have to trust me in this. Welcome to India. And not only the themes, but like things that happen here, happen there. There's a correspondence, and again, a kind of dualism or opposite. There's something. Did I tell you about chiasms? Chiasms comes from the word chi in Greek. It's X, so that things connect. And when you see things connect in corners, you know you're on the right track because it's intentional. You'll see in an individual unit that a unit will start with one word and end with the same word. And that connects the unit, bookends it. So you have the same thing in units. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Interestingly enough, and here this is does anybody know this? As I recall, each group of 3 tribes had a flag. Is that correct? Anybody know this? Is that correct? I mean,
Each one had a flag.
each one had a flag, but I thought there was something special
There was a
about
leader of each group of
the
three.
leader also had one. So it turns out, and this is pretty amazing, Bamidbar is, there are 13 units, is 70% narrative. Okay, I'm doing a very poor math, but it's basically, mostly it's narrative. But there are laws thrown in. You want to know where the laws are? All of them. They're in 2, 6, 8, and 12. They're in the flag tribes. They're in the center. And 7 has a few laws in it, and the laws, one of the laws in 7 is tzitzit. Where did tzitzit go? Please don't say corner. What's the Hebrew for where you put your tzitzit on the kanaf? On the wings, right? These are the wings. It's actually supposed to go in the center of the garment, not on the corner.
The tzitzit is supposed to go in the center of the garment.
Yes.
So you just said.
That's what this
It's
is.
hard to hear.
These
I was
laws,
repeating it because I was surprised.
these laws are the tzitzit of God. This is God's tzitzit.
So does Moshe Kline wear tzitzit with like tzitzit?
No. But one can learn that from this. That and I find it personally absolutely amazing that there are no laws, no chukim, no mishpatim, nothing in the other units. Everything else is narrative. Okay, those laws are only in the center of each of the 3 sides. So yeah, that's basically
Can
what
I
I'm
make a
saying.
connection?
Yeah.
I'm going to make a connection. Okay, so when you were talking about chiasms and
Yes.
the diagonal and the corners of diagonals, right?
Yes.
So it just made me think of something separate, but it has to do with the human body and eyes.
Yeah.
It has to do with eyes because when you learn eye exercises to heal the eyes, you look in the chiasms, you look to the side, to the bottom, you look up, you look to the corners, and then in the middle, and then you have a complete vision.
But isn't that also true of the brain? Like the right hand is controlled with the left brain.
So the idea
We're
behind the chiasms.
The human body is a chiasm.
But through chiasms is a secret of healing. There's a secret of healing the human body through working with chiasms. That's what I want to say. So that the Torah, these chiasms built into the Torah, are like a hint or like a secret towards our healing. And I'm sure there's a lot of that in this way of looking at the Torah.
My question is not from me, but I'll throw it out anyway. And then I'd like you to talk about your UK 5K.
Okay.
Because I love that story and I'd like to hear it again.
Okay.
But in the same way, I don't know what the Bible codes. When I first heard the Bible codes, I thought, wow. And then people said, but yeah, you can find anything if you want. Like you go to read the Sefer Telephonim and you'll find, connections. So is it because we now have computers?
No, it has nothing to do with computers. It's all text. Look at the text. Look at the words. The words are in blue.
It wasn't all about
right? It's actually just very pashut. It's just taking the text itself and looking at where those words repeat.
So how do you think that we lost it? Let's say that they knew it.
So
how do we
that's the danger. That's the danger of esoteric knowledge, is that when only a few people have it, and those few people dying don't pass it on, it's gone. That's why I am adamant that I really believe this. Every chumash should be printed like this. Every single one. Okay. This is how we should learn Torah. And I'll give you. I want to say one more. Anybody ever go to Parshat HaShavua, and invariably they always take the first pasuk of that parsha.
Yeah.
Right? It's like always. But that's very nice. First of all, I find it boring. But second, it's dangerous, and it's dangerous in the sense that it's not really dangerous, but you're missing out because. When you start the story in the middle, which most of these parshiot do, you miss the bigger picture. And the classic example is Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha is not the beginning of the unit. It's not even close, okay? There's a bigger picture, and it's beautiful, and it's stunning, and it's amazing, and you lose it when you don't see it this way.
So what's that picture of Lech Lecha, before and after Lech Lecha? Where should it be?
The Lech Lecha begins...
leads towards the
If I'm not mistaken, Lech Lecha begins much earlier with there are, I believe, 3 units in Breshit. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure there are 2 or 3 that begin both columns. They're dual columns. They're duality. It's a duality. Both columns begin with Eile Toldot. Okay, this is one of them. Lech Lecha is one of them. All right. It starts. The second column begins with his father's Toldot. Right. But what's interesting is that when you read these Eile Toldot, invariably what happens? You have the Aleph column is this one had this son 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 had this. It is a global history of the world, okay? Told through generations of who was born to whom. Bet always is our story, and it's more personal, and it's more involved, and it's more detailed, okay? And so you have the global, and you have the local. And again, you have duality. It's all about this duality. One playing off the other. It's not that one is better or worse than the other. And I don't want to make that implication. It's not good and bad duality. It's global and local duality. Okay? It's birth and death duality. It's these are the things that fall out from these learnings. Does that make sense?
So where does Lech Lecha start?
It starts at Eile Toldot, one of these are the generations. I have to look it up. No, Noach is unit 3. Noach, all of unit 3 is Noach. It's actually one of the
begins
long
at
units.
Eile Toldot, no?
Yes, it does. That's one of the units that begin with Eile
So that
Toldot.
break actually works, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Parshat Noach, as we know it.
No, but Noach is before that. Noach is actually what I read. It's a bara, it's a creation story. I mean, it's in a way, it's a double creation story. Not only does the unit start with the word bara, but also there's a rebooting and recreation of mankind, right? In that sense. So to answer, to address the other thing you wanted to talk about was the word havaya and why I use this word. I found, I'm sort of a pathological semanticist, which means that the meaning of words are maybe too important to me, I don't know. For me, what I tease out of the relationship of using, or the embedded in the relationship of the word Adonai, it's about power. Adonai, my lords or my masters, implies a master servant or a master slave, lord servant. It's a relationship of fear for me. It's not for everybody, but this is how I see it. And I think it's very sad that we've taken a word that embodies power to replace a name which means something completely different. What does Yud Hey Vav Hey mean? To me, it's Haya Hoveh Hieh. It's about the transcendentalness of the Creator, the timelessness, the universalness. It's the God of being, the God of becoming, the God who wants you to reach your highest potential. This is a relationship of love. And so we've taken a name which means love, which embodies love. It doesn't mean love, but it embodies love. And we've replaced it with a title that talks about power. And for me, that misses the point. Havaya is actually a word. Hey Vav Yud Hey means existence. And I think of really any blessing, blessed are you existence. And so for me, it's just more beautiful, and that's actually the word I use in all my brachot.
The other issue is that we also don't use we use it to replace.
Why we replace it because
we want to stay away from the original name, and so it's kind of a fear-based.
It is fear-based, and I think it's a mistake. I think 2,200 years ago, everybody used this name. They said the name. Instead of putting Yud Hey Vav Hey. No, they pronounced Yud Hey Vav Hey. Okay.
You think
Look, there are a lot of opinions, and there's no hard facts on this. I'm sorry?
When the Kohen Gadol said it on Yom Kippur, everybody trembled.
That was more than 4 letters.
That was the actual Meforash name.
Look, if you think of Miriam dancing at the Yam Suf, I'm sure she said this name. I'm sure they all used it. I'm sure they had no fear whatsoever. I'm sure they were totally in love and joy and had no... And because the Creator says, this is my name. I mean, He doesn't say don't use it. He never says that. It's fear. It's people saying, oh, it may be abused. You might, defame the name, use it in vain. Don't do that.
But
The name that He says is His name is I am whatever I am.
Right, it's already switched, but they probably felt it was too close, right? And I don't personally, this is a personal issue, I don't believe in the religion of fear. It's just not my way. Okay, I believe in the religion of love. I think Judaism has lost a lot by being so controlled in fear, and I think it's a mistake. And I think as you read this, you see this too. If you unpack the Torah in this way, you'll see that there's a lot of love in here. There's a lot of desire to create a peaceful coexistence that people can live together in a constructive way. And that is the essence of what the Torah is, that the laws that are given are symbolic of bigger things, of how we can create a society, a just, fair, and loving society, for us all to live together. And I would really encourage anyone, we had someone join, 5 years, we had somebody join 2 months ago. You can jump into this. If you want to join this, Yedidja, on Wednesdays at 6:45 to 8.
What is it? Where is it?
It's this.
Where is it?
At Yedidja, Kilat Yedidja on Khov Lifshitz, we meet every Wednesday at 6:45 to 8. We read in Hebrew and we discuss in English.
And it's free.
And it's free. And you can download this, the entire Torah in English or in Hebrew, from Moshe Kline's website, chaver.com. It's on the page there. Yes, it's on the bottom of the footer. You'll see. It's free. The English, unfortunately, is a horrific translation. I have to tell you, it's not good, but it's the only free one you can get. If you want a really good translation, it's Altars.
JPS is good.
No, Altar is the best. Altar is the closest to the poetry of the Hebrew, while being precise in the English. He's amazing. Robert Altar. Amazing. From Berkeley. It's just amazing. So that's it. If you have any more questions, I really think you need to talk to Moshe Kline, because that's all I really can tell you at this moment. Although it was really funny. yesterday Michael Kagan asked a question about Shemitah. He said, why is Shemitah in the Midbar not in Leviticus? Because it's all about being given at Har Sinai. And I said, because Shemitah is all about the people and the land, the connection of people and land. That belongs here. This is about Kohanim. Kohanim didn't have any land. It doesn't belong to them. Okay? So it's, and these kind of things fall out. And you walk and you go, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, it's like, really, it's better than drugs.
Depends who you ask us.
To answer what you were saying, the other Eliezer Todot that starts with is Eliezer Todot Shem, which makes
Right,
sense
Shem.
specifically.
Yes, that's right. There are a couple. I'm not as well versed with this.
I just looked it up.
We did this 4 years ago, so I don't really remember it. It's not really so fresh in my mind, really sheet. And we'll do it again.
Where are you guys
because-
holding now?
I'm sorry?
Where are you guys holding
We're in
now?
the middle of the middle.
Uh-huh.
You know, but it's
We're lost in the desert.
we're lost in this. You know, but I'm actually very excited to go back because now I have the training. Now I understand the paradigm. Now I can actually read the text and see these parallels and these connections that are really there. And to go back and do it again when you have the training, it's like it's just another level up.
Actually, in the part of the camps, if you actually analyze it textually, you'll see a parallel number of verses of each machaneh, and then the second machaneh, and then the description of the Mishkan, and then the description of the third and fourth machaneh, in exactly the same way that they were camped. And if you actually look at the number of verses, like 7 in this section, and 7 in this section, and 15 in the middle, and 7, whatever, it's quite fascinating that even at that level,
Yes.
and it's not the same thing that you're describing, it's also structured in, you know, in... If you do it pictorially, you suddenly see...
And it's very important to see this graphically. It's critical. You cannot comprehend this if you don't see it graphically on the page. You've got to see it. You can't just read it and think about it. It just jumps out at you. The synthesis in the chiasms, everything being connected. And I'll just make one comment on that. I don't doubt what you say at all, but I'm very skeptical when it comes to anything with number of verses because of this archbishop, who I'm not sure really knew what he was doing. Right? I'm not sure.
Yeah, don't talk about chapters.
No, but still, the psukim.
He did the psukim.
Yes, he did. He numbered the psukim. Yes, he did.
No,
He may have numbered them.
Sorry,
but
I didn't mean the number as given to psukim.
Ah.
I mean the number of psukim.
How many psukim there are? Which number they are?
I'm happy to look at that.
You have to be careful because the numbering of the psukim are also they
No,
divide.
it's not numbering of. It's number of.
Okay.
Number of, not numbering
But
of.
that's my point. If you take what is a traditional Hebrew pasuk and you happen to split it in a place because you think it's actually should be split there, doesn't mean that it's actually 2 psukim. It could be 1 psukim that has 3 numbers or 2 numbers. That's my issue. I'm not doubting it. I'm not trying to. I'm just saying that when it comes to this stuff, I am a little more cautious because of its origin. You know.
But the whole question of pay and samach is
No,
original
that's
text.
no.
That's original.
That's original.
not.
I didn't. I'm not
That's
talking.
not temporary.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that at all. And in fact, you see, if you look here, he keeps it. He writes down where the pay and samach is in his notes. He uses those.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you very much. Can we let keep these?
Yes, you can keep those.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Yes.
David Gila, who are not here. The money goes to Maboi Satul, and don't forget, if you want to come to Krav Maga, please speak to me afterwards. And Romeo! Yes. Right, don't change.